Is it running actually?
Yeah.
Oh no. Hello everyone. So sorry. We've had. Actually, can you actually hear me?
Let me
Yes. Oh gosh.
see. Yes.
Yes. It's
I think
you
so.
could. Maybe someone can respond.
Let's see.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Today we're woefully disorganized, but we've had a minor. It's not. I wouldn't call it a disaster, but we've had our building. Are you okay? Uh-oh. That's too loud. Yeah. Okay. Oh gosh. In any case, someone noticed that there may be a gas leak in our building, and so workers came here to open the wall in the back of our kitchen to check the gas pipes. That happened, or is happening, I should say, just now. So, our apologies for the delay at the moment, actually. And I have to still get myself a little bit better organized here. Okay, 1 second. Still don't. I just take this here. Okay. Well, hopefully I have everything pretty much that I need. I think so. But there's one thing that I still don't seem to have. Let me see. This is this. Okay. Well, I will actually go and retrieve what I think I need while we're doing our sort of preliminary talk, we should say. Preliminary get together. I put this here in a better way. Yeah, that's good. So, welcome once again. It's another Friday in our era of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. Now there are over 21 million confirmed cases as of today in the world. Several countries are experiencing renewed spikes of the virus despite measures for lockdowns and social distancing, which perhaps have not been very carefully implemented. New York is still doing okay. Well, I think that's locally very good news, but the United States, of course, is not. Okay, yes. I'm getting all these signals from in back of the camera. So the United States actually is maintained a steady level of about 1,000 fatalities every day from this. And yet there are people who are saying that everything is fine. We're doing incredibly great. That's really nonsense. I know I have to go faster, yeah. But I have to wake up and do I have? Oh, yes. The most important thing, which gets later and later, you will see in a second. Anyway, okay. So we have that. Then of course, I think it's also the tension which this extended pandemic is bringing to people. Thank you so much. This is what I need. Now I'll start to go faster in a second. Wonderful. Yeah, I put this away for the moment. So, the overall tension in the world, which this extended pandemic is causing, is actually exacerbating political conflict. And so now you have in Belarus, I mean, I should mention that this is both positive and negative, because we have the wonderful energy and activity that came from the tragedy of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter that in the United States, which is spread throughout the world. Now, of course, in Belarus, we have very dangerous situation. Also, and this is in perhaps most dangerous, we have so much tension now between China and Southeast Asia, China and especially the United States, and there is the possibility of conflict. I dare not say war, of course, as a kind of, what should I say, a kind of way to take people's attention off of the world problems that we have, which are, of course, COVID-19, of course, coronavirus and emerging viruses, and also, of course, the issue of climate change. Okay, I'm getting signals that I should stop with this, and I will, of course. Now, in keeping with this tradition that it's a very young tradition because it's only a few times, but I want to always introduce sometimes. Yes. Yeah. I want to introduce composers who are little known or not well known enough or not known at all. And today I will move to the composer Amy Beach. Amy Beach, who was considered as the first, how should I say, locally educated American composer. Her dates were 1867 to 1944, and she was a remarkable musician and a wonderful and fascinating composer. She was also a virtuoso pianist, and all in all, extremely well educated, fascinating person. Let's just say, okay. I'll just talk very, very little about it. I have this here I'm reading here because, of course, this is another case where I don't know by off the cuff exactly what she is. But she made her concert debut in 1883 at the age of 16, and there she played, of course, the Chopin Rondo in E flat, and also the Moscheles Piano Concerto in G minor, his third concerto. Moscheles, I don't think we will actually feature him, but was a very important person in early 19th century. That's but is largely forgotten today. Okay, now, an important little vignette, or I would say note about Amy Beach's life, is that she, in 1885, she married Dr. Henry Beach. Her maiden name was Amy Cheney. I'm not doing so well, but hopefully you'll follow with me. Okay, so and this is a Boston doctor, a surgeon, who was 24 years her senior, and sort of thought of her as a kind of feminine trophy. This is something that seemed to happen much too often, of course, like all the time. And the marriage, which for some reason Amy Beach, who was only 18 at that time, agreed to, was conditioned. This was the condition of the Henry Beach, the doctor, that as I've written here, her willingness to live according to his status, since he was one of Boston's high society, that is, to function as a society matron and a patron of the arts. So rather than exploiting her own great talent, she was supposed to help others, I would assume men, with their talent. And she agreed never to teach piano and to limit her own performances to 2 public recitals per year, with profits donated to charity. But that left the fact that she could actually devote herself more to composition, not necessarily to having her pieces performed, but to her own creations in her own time. And that was great. Amy Beach, for our clarinet community, unfortunately did not write works for clarinet, although she did write a wonderful small woodwind quintet, actually very late in her life. But there are several works of hers which actually would work very well in clarinet transcription. And I hope to actually be able to publish these if I get the proper permission to do that. In any case, I want to play a little bit of one of her most famous and large-scale works. It's called her Gaelic Symphony. And I will try to get this to work again, once again, in my barely competent way. There we go. Okay, now, where am I? This should go here. Okay. And what I need first to do is this now. Here. If I'm going to play, hold it. Okay, good. I know, this is the wrong piece. Sorry. Oh, awful. Where am I? Smith. Here we are. This one. I have to do the same thing now, I believe. Okay. Good. I'm getting there, although it's still rather slow going. And here, although I did check everything out. Somehow, this rarely works for me. Let's first get onto here. Yes. Is connected. Okay, and then I go to this part here. No. I know, it's so frustrating. Yeah. Come on. I thought that I'm not such a terrible person technologically speaking, but I don't know why I can't work this. Okay, good. Now that's done. Okay, here we go. Okay, let's go again. I did it though. It says 1896. I'm gonna go. So you can see tremendous energy in this piece, and very difficult to find a place in this first movement, this Allegro con fuoco, where I could actually stop at a cadence, because it basically does not have a full cadence until the very end of the movement. It's very also compositionally interesting, as well as being so vibrant. This is Amy Beach. I just mentioned a little bit more about her, and that is in June 1910, and I feel badly about this, but I'll say fortunately her husband died, because before that, even for composition, he forbade her from actually taking lessons, so that this was beneath the status of wealthy Boston matron this way. So she did actually study herself and was very much self-taught, I say, in composition. After the death of her husband, though, she did pick herself up. She went and spent a couple of years in Europe, first trying to get herself together, and then concertizing, and was quite well known as a pianist in the very early 20th century. So this is Amy Beach. Before continuing with everything, I want to just mention that, just mention about the unfortunate and very sad passing of two clarinetists, that both from the Metropolitan Opera. This is Joseph Rabbi, who was principal clarinet of the opera for many years, and also James Ogdenbenny, who was their bass clarinetist. They were both wonderful musicians, wonderful clarinet players, and it's very sad to hear of their passing. I just mention this to everyone now. So, I've done this, I guess, now, and I think what I will do is I'll leave this just in case. I have a little more, but I don't think I will bother with it. And let's put this over here. Yes, the Metropolitan Opera. Oh, what is this orchestra? Oh, I'm so sorry. I got it. This is the Detroit Symphony playing. It's with Neme Yarvi conducting the works. She has been getting a resurgence of notoriety, I must say. But even so, she deserves, I think, much, much more. She's really very major composer. Okay, now we move back to the topic at hand. This is Carl Nielsen. Yeah. And especially his clarinet concerto. Now, I mentioned last week, and then in the notice for today, how music can actually be, in a certain sense, a psychological study. Now, I'm beginning to go out on a limb with this, of course, but when we look at the concerto and we look at the relationship of Carl Nielsen and his great friend Eugen, and I don't pronounce it correctly, and I apologize. I think I need to spend a few months trying to master Danish pronunciation. Oxenvad, in any case, that's the last name. It's the clarinet player. There are very striking things about Nielsen's concerto. Now, it has been said that Oxenvad perhaps was bipolar, perhaps he was a manic depressant, perhaps he had certain mental disease. That's something that at least I have never been able to find any actual kind of corroborated evidence about this, for sure. It could be that he was just moody. Who knows? Like many of us are. But what we see in the concerto, and as I had mentioned last week when Nielsen wrote the quintet and the last movement, the variations movement, he decided to somehow describe the character of each of the players of each of his friends, I should say, who played in the Copenhagen quintet. In the quintet itself, the writing for clarinet in the last movement is rather extreme, and extreme compared to the other instruments. So even in the quintet, there's for instance, in this preludium, which is actually, for me, the centerpiece of the whole quintet itself. It is quite remarkable prelude, I should say, to these variations. And in that, you have these all of a sudden kind of exclamations or sort of outbursts by the clarinet player. And then that leads finally to this chorale and these variations. The concerto itself also seems to work in a series of waves, as I had mentioned before, and I will be dealing with this in more detail in a minute, but it always starts out in a very normal way. I would even say in a very bourgeois way, incredibly with academic, without any kind of peculiar qualities, whatever, just incredibly average, on purpose. But that quickly changes little by little, and, sorry.
You should not respond to me.
It's okay. I know, we know. We're going to get our spam phone call in a couple minutes. That happens every day at the same time. And now maybe Ayako is trying to take care of it before it actually disturbs us. So, so it's, as I mentioned, starts in normal, but quickly something's changed, and it's kind of like a wave, becomes more and more unusual, and in many ways more and more disturbed. And I will go through this as in more detail in a minute. Now, I also talked about earlier about musical icons, and this piece I find very special in what I would say is his extended use of musical icons. And this is also something I will point out here. And I say they're musical icons because we can look at them, these little parts, the way he composes, as perhaps quotations from other composers, from other times, etc., etc. But I do not see them that way. They are not literal quotations, but they are expressive gestures which have actually come from musical history. And together with that, there's also, as I sort of hinted at last time, and I'm not going to get into it because I don't know enough about this, but I sense it quite strongly. There is elements of both folk music and elements of jazz in the piece. Well, with jazz, you wonder about a bit, but I'm sure that's in 1928 that Nielsen and Oxenvad talked about this new music. Again, I don't know enough about Nielsen, and I have a biography in English, but it's not very detailed in things like this. Ah, I have this. This is nice, I think. Oh, no. Sorry. This is about last week's Florence Prize. That's it's okay. Don't worry. I don't need anything. It's just that I had a few kind of nice quotations from Nielsen, which I don't quite remember exactly, but I will paraphrase them because it's enough. Anyway, so there is a sense of jazz in this piece, and I actually think that there is jazz earlier, and that I'm going to play a bit. We have the bassoon duet here, and with this, I think I do have, I can actually find the quotation. Let me see if I have this. Where I wonder, no, I don't have it. Not here. Oh, maybe here. Well, I have a feeling that I was more organized than I thought I would. Well, these are other quotations, but so I don't need this. But he, well, maybe I can find it here. I know I'm wasting a lot of time. Let me see if I have it. I had it in another thing here. Well, anyway, this is not important. Okay, so I go back to the clarinet. Where's my clarinet? Here. Okay, then the clarinet variation, even in the quintet, where Nielsen mentioned that this should be somehow a domestic argument between the clarinet and the bassoon, even though it can be an argument, I don't know, and I may be totally mistaken about this, and I do not even pretend to have any actual extra information that would justify what I'm going to say. But I do have this feeling, somehow, that it's not simply an argument, but it is an impression of jazz from someone who maybe has heard it very little, or maybe just looked at music, whatever. And actually, first I go to the piano, and then I will go to the clarinet. So, in the quintet, let me see, I get my little score here. As it starts here, very, with that. And that's it. That's we're going to A major. And then you have here in the bassoon. And the bassoon, basically, until he actually has a tune at the very end of this little variation, is always playing these half steps. You know, so it's kind of, you know, so we have something like have all this kind of half-step business, which is a little odd that it's just so insistent. But if we listen to this early jazz, we always have that there. Then I go now to the clarinet. Yeah. And the question I have, and I'm going to take the music and actually put it here because basically I know it. Remember, I just don't want it. Where's my clarinet? So here we starts with a kind of a, and then why do we have all these dotted rhythms? With that, I find that kind of fascinating. Next one, same thing. Then we have triplets along with that. Plus this augmented arpeggio. And then going on. And then after that, of course, it becomes very normal. And then I'm not playing quite in rhythm, but and it ends in a very friendly way. And I apologize to purists because in every source I've ever seen about this little variation, it's that way. But I don't know why I feel a compulsion to change it to. Maybe that's simply my own kind of academic leaning. So anyway, so I could be wrong, but the sense inside of a kind of little hint of jazz, I think, is in there. And it's so different from everything else that is in this quintet. Okay, now we turn to the concerto. Maybe I put this, no, I keep it here, I think. And for that, I will go to the piano and go through parts of it here. And then why I say this is kind of music as a psychological study. It's also, I can say this is music as theater, almost. And the way he's writing it almost has more to do with a kind of theatrical production, or I would even say a kind of monodrama, or kind of one person play in a way. Then it has to do with musical composition, although it is in different movements, we can say, which are put together into one large whole. But coming to this here, can I be heard okay again? Is that all right? Is that, yeah.
Can I interrupt that?
What's that?
John A. says you are correct, Charlie. It's a misprint.
Ah. Well, I always thought it's a misprint, and I think it's a misprint everywhere. And I couldn't. I'm talking about in sort of the written G or the written F. Yeah. So I think that yeah. I feel vindicated. Yes. Thank you very much. That's very right. Okay. So now, the first thing I have to say is that Nielsen, and like actually maybe everybody, but he was very actually vocal about this also, had a personal relationship with intervals. Yeah. And in this piece, we have the basic good intervals, which are the fifth and the second and the inversion of that, which is the fourth, and the second also. And that actually creates both basic melodic motifs that go through this whole piece. And then here, and here. And these chords actually appear, and I mentioned this last time, in all important places in the piece. And in the middle of this piece, as I mentioned also, but I will just mention it again for people, just to okay, it's really the very middle of the piece. The French horn has an extended solo, which is very unusual in a certain sense, very different from everything else. And some people even have said, well, maybe this is hint of 12-tone music and some kind of nonsense like that, but that's not true. But what it does is it is a collection of these principal chords. So we have this. And that, of course, is in fact and then it seems like after this kind of middle kind of bridge between these two big sections of the work, that he forgets about it because okay, but in fact he doesn't at all, because what this melody actually is accompanied by is this. Again, emphasizing these primary chords. Okay, so why do I speak about these chords right now, and why do I, or I should say, and how does this connect to this kind of psychological study that I'm going to say? Is that okay? There are people working in the background in other places trying to tear down our wall. I hope they don't create an unbelievable mess anyway, but this day and age, that's just a minor issue. So we have these primary chords, and then he distorts things by half steps. You see, and that then creates, instead of this here, it creates major thirds, which in this piece, in fact, have a kind of distorted sense. And instead of the fifth or the fourth, the tritone. And the tritone becomes a very central part of this piece. And if we look at Nielsen, sort of thinking about the personality of his friend Oxenvad, that perhaps we did have this kind of bipolar, kind of two different personalities. The tritone becomes very important because the tritone is right in the middle of everything and combines different tonalities in a way. So if we have here, and then that way, so that way, this thing. Then also the tritone extended ends up that way. And that we can also find very pronounced in this piece. You see. So this is, the tritone becomes kind of bridge between, in a sense, two personalities. And he treats these two personalities in different ways. You know, I should also mention, though, that this is 1928, and if I'm not mistaken, this is Nielsen's last instrumental work, and probably his last major work, that is. Right, there are choral works after that, I know, even though he did live a few years more than this. But this was also after his heart attack, and I think he understood somehow that his time was limited, in a way. So there can easily be this kind of biographical aspect to this piece as well, as a kind of psychological study of his friend. And I'm not going to get into this psychologizing particularly. I'd rather analyze the piece in a way to show how, and for me, what is most important about this piece is how, although it has a reputation of being kind of stream of consciousness, or in places very, what should I say, not random, but maybe unstructured in a certain sense. But in fact, that's not at all true. And the structuring of this piece is very, very careful and very, very interesting in its complexity. Yeah. So I will, if I do this in great detail, of course, I'm going to be here for several hours. For people who read Japanese, and I think I may have mentioned this last week, I did a very extended series of articles in the magazine. It's a woodwind magazine called Pipers, about the concerto. It was about more than half a year's work, more than that. It's a whole year, I think, of articles. It's a monthly. So if you do read Japanese, maybe somebody does there, you will find in what I'm saying in much greater detail here. Anyway, we start with the beginning of this piece. And one thing that makes this piece awkward for clarinet players is that we're actually in F major. And we're in F major playing on the A clarinet, which of course means that we play in A flat, which is not so terrible if you actually ever practice A flat major and works in A flat major. But it does create a kind of awkwardness that goes throughout this piece. There's so much to talk about in it. But going back to this F major, we start with that way, with our motive, and he begins, and then, so already you take something which is tremendously academic, very, in a way, uninteresting, then, and then, and then here we have, he's playing around with intervals. Here we start here. He sort of backs up by, again, this half-step business is there. And then here we have this going on. Which I mentioned last week, and connecting to this little folk song which I played for you last week. That's a, but then here going again the fifth, and then we have a fugue. That's a little kind of odd for a beginning of a concerto to start with this fugue here, and then this fugue. Seems to be really going around these half steps. So it's all about the dissonance here, this sort of tension of is that. So in this case, for instance, this one is between the F and G flat. And then the clarinet comes in, and he forgets the fugue, of course. So this way. So this is, again, like in a play, rather, kind of an opening scene where you have the background, you have the maybe if it's a musical production, you have the chorus, but you have kind of either country scene or maybe village scene, and it's very normal, but something inside is not quite right. Yeah. Okay. So then the clarinet comes in. And we're in F major. And then what happens? All of a sudden we're in D minor. Oh, something sad. And then we have this. Oh, maybe not. But then A minor. Maybe yes. A little sad. Again, F major. Very. And then of course, what he's doing is simply. But the orchestra comes in, again, this half step. This half step too high. And then he goes on. And then he starts to distort. And then the orchestra comes in again, not in F major, but in E. Which we think is some simple kind of gesture that comes out of nowhere, but in fact it becomes very, very important in this piece, because here he is pointing out F and E, and this piece we see has this tension between F and E. In many guises, between F major and E major, between their relative minors, between their dominants, which would be C and B as well. All this half-step tension is so pronounced in this. And what happens here after that? So we have this. And then with that, the orchestra comes in even a half step lower with E flat, then a half step again, and then G going above, and then D flat, then going completely around this F major without actually coming to F major at all. And this is, as again, this kind of psychological issue that we are, even though this is our center, somehow we are trying to find it, but we don't find it. This way, trying to find it. And what happens after that is here we have, all of a sudden, we have then we have, and that seems like something out of nowhere, but we're in B major. Even though Nielsen doesn't really spell it that way, but we are in B major, which of course is the dominant of E major. And then the clarinet comes in. It's so nice. We are in E major, it's going there. And then the orchestra, though, says, nope. That way. Nope. This is C major, which is the dominant, of course, of F. There. So, clarinet player, you are in the wrong place. But then the clarinet goes on, so that then we have here, he says, he gives a little kind of nod to our F major, then B major. But again, the orchestra says, nope. And then we go on to there, to G sharp minor, of course, which is connected to B major and to E major. So it's still there. So I go through, and I can go through this more and more carefully, but I don't bother. You sort of get the idea of this here. I want to, though, take a small detour now, if I may. No, but this is be okay. It's still related in a very important way, and for this, I have to, let me see, here we are, yes. Here. Okay, it's hard to see in this, but for this I must thank my good friend and very wonderful clarinetist, John Kruse, who actually gave me a copy of the clarinet part, which Nielsen wrote for Oxenrod while he was composing the piece. And this is really the most interesting and important source for understanding what Nielsen wrote, and I'm going to get into that in a little greater detail as well. And also to look at his process of composition in a way. So now we go to here. Yeah, let me go back, and I'm going to do. Instead of this, I take my little pen now. Whoops. Here. See if we have it. I want to see. I want to show things. So I want to go from the back myself. Over here. So I can see it. Do you understand? I'm so sorry. Okay. Now, this is, see, very interesting when if I point to here, and in this digital copy, it's not as clear as it is in the copy which I got here, but you'll notice that there's a slur around, and then underneath is here. You see. Now, what is very clear in that, and we can see from here more clearly, is you see that that slur has been crossed out in pencil. We can get that. See? Here too, you see the slur has been crossed out and that's been put in. All of that. Okay, that's what I wanted to mention now. Now the question, of course, is why, and that we don't know exactly, but I would assume that it had to do somehow with technical issues, the clarinet. But why do I mention this? And that's because here, this here, in general, this is a very nice little, we can call it either a folk song or a children's tune, something of that here. But usually it's played in a kind of violent way. And, oh, I forget. I'm sorry. Oh, gosh. Work is everything here. You know, and it's kind of like, ha, I did it. That way. No, but that's not what is happening in this at all. Even there. That's a, yeah. And that's why I actually like to play it. Ah, that's nice. You see. And if I ever get around to actually talking again about clarinet technique, I'll explain how even using normal fingerings for this is not so difficult. Okay, that's my aside here, and that's I have many pet peeves about this. But the sense that this is kind of like that, and then the orchestra goes no, and then you go no. That's a kind of these psychological moments, which are fascinating and something that we can actually bring out in this piece. Okay, I must go on. No, I have it. Yes. So I think maybe I even stay here with everything here. And then remember, I mentioned how Nielsen told Oxenvad that there are parts of this piece like Bach, okay? And also I mentioned how in this place here, that this place here, he wants you to hold the G a long time. And of course, that becomes the tritone, which is so incredibly important in this piece. And that's is there. Is it this way here. And of course, as also, I'm just recapitulating what I said before. It's like you're trying to reach from that E. You're trying to reach the F, but you don't reach it. But you struggle to reach it. You go on. Okay. And then finally, after we go on and on here, and we have a, and that goes to the C sharp, and then finally we get to the fourth in this, and then here, which of course is the inversion. So it's as if we are in F major now. And throughout this whole time, the orchestra comes in. It's like, this is but no, this is wrong. It keeps going all the way around, playing a little bit, that's maybe E to F here, but no, again, not right. And then that, of course, will go to E major here, to, in a certain way, to the alter ego. But instead, he goes to C major. It's nonsense, don't worry, it's all that. And we come to the second theme. Now we have very kind of typical classical piece in F major. Second theme will usually be in the dominant, and that's what Nielsen does here. So here we see in this piece that what binds it together also is a classical sense of key relationships, and of in a certain way I would say even of proportions, you know, which become complicated because of this conflict of the half step between the F and the E, and then all their sort of what should I say, this sort of satellite keys that go around that thing. But we have this here. And if you think that sounds a little like Gershwin, or has a little jazz sense, why not? And I believe that makes perfect sense. You know, I have to go back just a tiny bit here because I forgot to mention two things. As this piece goes on in the beginning, as we start very nicely, it develops in a way, in this wave, sense of wave, where it starts very normally and then gets more and more agitated. And here we have, and then here that says, and these are all interesting because he's combining tonics and dominants in all of this as he goes here this way, and then we have this F sharp. It all comes out of this dominant of E major, B major here, going there, and he ends, of course, in E, on the E. And then the orchestra comes in with this, and then here, and then in pizzicato, all the open strings, in other words, all the fifths that you have. So this is like all the good intervals, but all put together, rah, like that. And then the clarinet comes in, starting not, of course, on our F, but on an F sharp, and tries to have the fifth, but doesn't succeed, and only gets up to the G rather than that. Okay, and what happens here, of course, is it introduces the snare drum. and that's could be it's kind of an alter ego to the clarinet, or kind of a foil to the clarinet, and we can look at that snare drum part in many ways, and I'm not really going to deal with it in this live stream now, but it does come in all these kind of emotionally very charged moments in the piece, and you can decide for yourselves why that happens, but the fact that it does happen is very important. Okay, then here we in C major we're there, and he starts out, as I mentioned, with this kind of jazzy business, but quickly he changes. It's sort of as if he goes home, in a way. He goes out of the world of jazz to there. And then comes to this part here, which is very interesting. And then here. And what is that? We're going. That could be Mahler. In fact, from this Kindertotenlieder. But and this brings me to my point about this kind of extended use of expressive icons. So I would not call this simply a quotation. What it is, it's taking kind of an essence of something and using it, just like when Mozart does. Which we wouldn't say that's a quotation of just about every piece written in at least the later 1800s into the 1900s. But no, there's a particular sense, emotional sense to that. Here too. And back to here. Okay. And I have a feeling that I'm running out of time. Is that... Let me see. So, yes. So I'm going to actually skip around a little because, as I mentioned, there's so much to do in this piece, and I want to actually cover several things. So I want to talk more right now about this sense of icon here, and this section here in the second part here, where we start with this part here, and we're in C. This whole section here, where we see a kind of juxtaposition of different characters or of different personalities within this one kind of overall movement, or even part of the movement here. Starts off, of course, with this kind of this part which reminds us of Bach. And again, he mentions the things that should be like Bach here, and but with this sense of half step, always going sort of tension in this half step here. Okay, but we can't say that this is actually simply a quotation from Bach, but again, this is a kind of extended sense of an icon which comes out of the music of Bach. And then here, and maybe I just play the clarinet makes sense, although I don't like to play sitting down. But after all of this, here we start in one, and then from the C he goes to F here, and we have the second one of these. And then that continues, and then we have something very different. There. So all of a sudden, it's kind of scherzando quality. So the music has changed very much at that point, and we do it again. And the piano, sorry. And then after that, and he writes ben tenuto and cantabile, molto cantabile. We have in the orchestra. And this kind of very kind of different sort of music here, different personality. And then it goes on, as back referring to our initial melody here. And then we have these parts here. And this is what I wanted to show in terms of the sense of icon here. So there. And then with triplet this way. And then of course we move on with that. And then we go back to this, once again, from that, this feeling of tenuto feeling. And we have this here. And all of these gestures we can find in different works, in different composers from the 19th century. So here, for instance, too, and that's actually, I find particularly interesting because then I have here, let's see if I can actually find this. 1 second. No. I did something wrong. Here. Yeah, here we are. Okay. No, why? All of a sudden, it's not working for me. Wait. Let me do this way. I'm so sorry that I'm so incompetent all of a sudden with this. But let's look. I go that way. Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Now finally I got it. I had all this organized, but then it doesn't. So what I wanted to do is simply show you how we have this passage here. And then goes, and then he changes, of course. What is it? Oh. That's right. Then he moves on to something totally different. That way. But what do we find here? Wow. That's Chopin. All of a sudden. Yeah. You see. But we cannot call that a kind of quotation from Chopin. But again, it's taking the essence of a kind of expression and using it, yeah, in the sense of an icon. Okay, all I have time for these just little examples. I feel badly about that, but I don't want to take up, half a year of live streams to go through this piece, even though it is fascinating. Okay, so I'm going to go on to different parts of this now. So with that, I go back now. Yes, I know. But I need to do two things here, and hopefully, if you bear with me, I will show you. Now, the first actually comes in the beginning. It's sort of right after where I was talking about with this part. Then everything goes on and on in this kind of Gershwin-esque way, I should say, or a little bit jazzy way. And then it starts to sort of break apart. And we have... this reed is so soft, it's ridiculous. And then we have this here. And then we have... and then something totally different here. And it sounds kind of almost random, even though we do have written there that in the bass. So that is all, but everything that happens above that, is really sort of... at least you get that fifth here, and that seems very academic in a way, and then this comes out of the blue there. But remember that this is a place where Nielsen talks about this is like Bach, in a way. And we can say, okay, technically maybe it is if you have... So you have the lower voice, it's in the bass, and then other things like that. But if we look at this more carefully, we'll see something that we can find throughout this piece. Even though melodically he sort of stretched things all around like this and that and the other thing, what in fact we have is this. Now listen carefully to it. So once again, I'm going to play just what is dee or dee, and then going on from that. Now even from there, we start this way. And then from here, and from there, we go to here. How about that? This is what's happening before we come to this place here. Right here. And then we are in B flat minor. And then, in fact, what he's doing is this here. And then this goes... and then here. And then here. This passage, which seemed so random, is that. It's so beautiful. And then that goes... And that is, let's see, so the incredible originality of Nielsen comes from using this very, in a way, traditional harmonic language in an incredibly new way, so that it's sort of inside that way, as opposed to being on the surface. But as a performer, when I see that this way, all of a sudden my eyes open up, my brain opens up, and I see what this piece is. And I find the tremendous beauty in this piece. Okay. And so even here, all of a sudden, we have, and then we have, then, I'm sorry, I'm not doing well, but there's our minor, and then he doesn't resolve, though, to here, but we can move on to that. I play this one more time, and I'm sort of boxed in here, so I'm very uncomfortable trying to play. But anyway. And it's sort of, we can think like Bach. You know, I think that I will stop now, but I will actually continue with Nielsen next week. I think it's worthwhile, and hopefully we'll do just half of it. And then I would like to move on to something else, perhaps to the idea of what is an original version of something. Well, with that said, be well, everybody. Take care, be safe. Thank you for putting up with me once again. Okay, take care.